A young black boy from a modest rental apartment claimed his daddy was a four-star general. It was the most ridiculous lie Mrs. Eleanor Hargrove had heard in all her years of teaching. She did not whisper it. She announced it to the enter fourth-grade class at Jefferson Elementary. Then she snatched Malik Thompson's carefully written assignment off his desk and ripped it in half. The tearing sound echoed through the room. She ripped it again and again. The pieces drifted like snow onto Malik's worn sneakers. You don't get to make up fairy tales about being special, Malik. Generals live in big houses. Their children go to private schools. They drive expensive cars. Her voice grew colder still. They certainly don't show up looking like, well, like you. The young boy stood frozen, his hands trembling. Every child in the room stared. She crumpled the torn pieces and dropped them into the trash. Pathetic. Have you ever watched a teacher destroy a child for being black and telling the truth? Earlier that morning, Malik Thompson had woken to his father's voice calling from downstairs. Breakfast is ready, soldier. The Thompson family lived in a modest three-bedroom apartment in Arlington, Virginia, close enough to Fort Myer that the morning bugle could sometimes be heard if the windows were open. The furniture was clean but worn. Family photos lined the walls, yet nothing announced a military household. No uniforms on display, no medals in frames, no flags or plaques. Security protocol. General Raymond Thompson never advertised what he did. In the kitchen, Malik found his dad sitting at the table in jeans and a Georgetown sweatshirt. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary father, maybe a teacher, maybe an office worker. His mother, Dr. Renee Thompson, poured coffee in her scrubs. She had an early surgery at Walter Reed. On the refrigerator, a child's crayon drawing showed a stick figure in uniform, with 4 stars on each shoulder. Next to it, a calendar with today circled in red marker, Parent Career Day. Malik could not stop smiling. He had been waiting for this day for weeks. Dad, can I tell them about the time you met the president? General Thompson glanced at his wife. Renee gave him that look, the one that said their son deserved better than secrets. Malik, remember what we talked about. Some things stay private for security reasons, but everyone else gets to brag about their parents. I know, son. Raymond's voice was gentle but firm. Our family is different. We keep a low profile, you understand. Malik nodded, though he did not fully understand. Why did other kids get to feel proud while he had to stay quiet? Renee squeezed her husband's hand across the table. He deserves to be proud of you, Raymond. I know. The general looked at his son. Just keep it simple today, okay? You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Malik finished his cereal and headed upstairs to get ready for school. He had no idea that before the day was over, simple would become impossible. Jefferson Elementary sat in the heart of Arlington. The school served everyone. Military families transferring in and out constantly, diplomat kids whose parents worked at embassies, immigrant families chasing the American dream, working-class children whose parents cleaned the buildings where policy was made. It was supposed to be a place where every child mattered equally. But Mrs. Eleanor Hargrove had taught there for many years. In that time, she had developed a very clear sense of who was telling the truth and who was exaggerating. Her classroom walls displayed the American flag, photos of her shaking hands with local city council members, and certificates of teaching excellence. She wore her flag pin every single day. Though she had never served in the military, never lived overseas, and never worked outside comfortable suburban classrooms, she knew exactly what generals' families looked like. And Malik Thompson did not fit the picture. During morning announcements, Principal Linda Carver's voice crackled through the intercom. Good morning, Jefferson Elementary. Reminder that Parent Career Day is today. We're honored to have some very special guests joining us. Please make them feel welcome. In Mrs. Hargrove's classroom, the energy shifted at once. Bradley Prescott, a white boy whose father lobbied on Capitol Hill, raised his hand. Mrs. Hargrove, my dad's meeting with 3 senators this week about the infrastructure bill. How impressive, Bradley. Her face lit up. Public service is so important to our democracy. Isabella Morales, A Latina girl whose mother cleaned the Capitol building raised her hand next. My mom works there too. She cleans the offices after everyone leaves. That's nice, Isabella. Mrs. Hargrove's smile did not quite reach her eyes. Now, let's open our textbooks to page 42. Malik watched the exchange. He had seen this pattern before. Some kids got praised, others got dismissed. It usually depended on what their parents did and how much money they had. Later that morning, Mrs. Hargrove handed out the assignment. Class, I want you to write 3 paragraphs about your parents' careers. What do they do? Why does it matter? How does it help our community? She walked between the desks. Do this before our guests arrive. Best handwriting, please. Students bent over their papers at once. Malik pulled out his pencil and began writing in careful block letters. My dad is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He has served our country for many years in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He helps make important decisions to keep America safe. There are only a small number of 4-star generals in the whole military. My dad worked his way up from second lieutenant. He says leadership means serving others, not yourself. My dad has been deployed many times. Sometimes I don't see him for months, but he does it because he loves our country. That's what makes his job matter. Tyrell Jackson, Malik's best friend, leaned over and whispered, Yo, is your dad really a general? Malik nodded, keeping his voice low. Yeah, he just doesn't talk about it much. That's so cool. My dad just fixes cars at the garage. My dad says every job matters. Malik whispered back. Your dad keeps people safe on the roads. That's important too. Tyrell grinned. Mrs. Hargrove appeared beside Malik's desk. Her shadow fell across his paper. She leaned down and read over his shoulder. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Malik felt his stomach drop. Something in her expression told him she did not believe a single word. Yet she said nothing. Not yet. She simply walked back to her desk and made a note in her planner. As the morning wore on, Malik's phone buzzed in his backpack. The school allowed students to carry emergency contact devices. His was an old smartphone his parents could reach him on. He checked it during the bathroom break. A text from his mother. Dad's flying back early from Korea, landing at Reagan this afternoon. He'll make career day after all. Keep it a surprise. Malik's heart soared. His dad had been in Korea for several weeks for strategic planning meetings Malik was not allowed to know about, but he was coming home early. He would be at career day. Malik wanted to shout it from the rooftop. Instead, he slipped the phone back into his bag and returned to class. He did not notice Mrs. Hargrove watching him from her desk. He did not see the skeptical look in her eyes. She had already made up her mind about Malik Thompson. That boy was a liar, and today, in front of everyone, she was going to teach him a lesson about honesty. What she did not know was that before the day ended, a 4-star general would walk through her classroom door, and everything she thought she knew about Malik Thompson would shatter like glass. The following morning arrived with unusual excitement at Jefferson Elementary. Parents began filing into Mrs. Hargrove's classroom early. A lawyer in a sharp suit, an architect carrying blueprints, a software developer, a chef in kitchen whites, a nurse still wearing scrubs from the night shift. Mrs. Hargrove greeted each one with varying levels of enthusiasm. The lawyer received a firm handshake and bright smile. The chef received a polite nod. The nurse received a quick, "Thank you for your service," before Hargrove turned to arrange chairs. Malik sat at his desk, checking his phone every few moments. His dad had texted early. "Landed, catching up on sleep, see you at school soon. Proud of you, son." He just had to make it a little longer. Class, Mrs. Hargrove clapped her hands. Before our guests present, let's share the paragraphs you wrote. I want our visitors to hear how thoughtfully you described their work. One by one, students stood and read. Bradley Prescott talked about his father's lobbying firm and the important bills they influenced. Mrs. Hargrove beamed. Isabella Morales talked about her mother's cleaning work and how she took pride in making buildings shine. Mrs. Hargrove offered a tight smile and moved on quickly. Then she called on Malik. "Malik Thompson, you're next." Malik stood. His paper shook slightly in his hands. He cleared his throat and began reading. "My dad is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He has served our country for many years in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He helps make important decisions to keep America safe." Mrs. Hargrove's expression changed immediately. "There are only a small number of 4-star generals in the whole military. My dad worked his way up from second lieutenant. He says, leadership means serving others, not yourself." "Stop!" The word cut through the classroom like a gunshot. Every student froze. Parents looked up from their phones. Mrs. Hargrove stood slowly from her desk. "Malik, come here, please." Malik walked to the front of the room on shaky legs, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Class," Mrs. Hargrove said, her voice taking on a teacher lecture tone. "This is a perfect example of what we call embellishment. Malik, I need you to be honest with everyone right now. What does your father actually do?" "He's a general, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "Malik, I have been teaching for many years. I have met generals. I have taught generals' children." She crossed her arms. "Generals do not live in modest rental apartments. Their children do not attend public schools in worn-out sneakers. Their families are well connected in the community. There are official records, social events, recognition." Malik felt his face growing hot. "But ma'am, my dad keeps a low profile because of what? Secret missions?" Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Several students giggled nervously. Bradley Prescott raised his hand. "Mrs. Hargrove, maybe his dad really is, Bradley, I appreciate your kindness, but this is a teaching moment." She turned back to Malik. "I checked with the office yesterday. There is no General Thompson listed on our parent registry. Your father's occupation is listed as government employee. That's very different from a 4-star general, isn't it?" Malik's eyes filled with tears. "He puts that on forms for security reasons. He told me—" "Enough!" The classroom jumped at her raised voice. "You will sit down right now. You will rewrite this assignment with the truth, and you will apologize to this class and to our guests for wasting everyone's time with fantasy stories. Do you understand me?" Tears spilled down Malik's cheeks, but he did not move. "Malik, I said sit down. My dad didn't raise a liar, ma'am." The room went completely silent. Mrs. Hargrove's face flushed red. Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What did you just say to me?" "My dad is a general. He's flying back from Korea. He'll be here soon. You'll see." Mrs. Hargrove's jaw clenched. "To the principal's office. Now." Tyrell Jackson stood up. "But Mrs. Hargrove, Malik isn't lying. I've seen—" "Tyrell, sit down before you join him." Tyrell sank back into his chair, shooting Malik an apologetic look. Malik grabbed his backpack. As he walked toward the door, Mrs. Hargrove delivered her final blow loud enough for everyone to hear. "Class, let this be a lesson. Honesty and humility are virtues we cherish. Making yourself seem more important than you are, especially when you come from certain backgrounds, is the opposite of character." Malik stopped at the door. His hands gripped the straps of his backpack so hard they left marks. Every eye in the room watched him leave in shame. He had little time before his father arrived. Little time to survive being called a liar in front of everyone. He had no idea that Mrs. Hargrove was about to have one of the worst days of her teaching career. The hallway felt longer than usual. Malik walked slowly toward the principal's office, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Behind him, he could hear Mrs. Hargrove's voice resuming the career day introductions as if nothing had happened, as if she had not just destroyed him in front of the entire class. He pulled out his phone. Still no new messages from his dad, probably still resting after the long flight from Korea. Malik thought about texting him, about telling him what had just happened. But what would he say? That his teacher called him a liar, that nobody believed him? His dad had enough to worry about. Malik did not want to seem weak. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. Through the main office window, Malik spotted Principal Linda Carver on the phone. She was nodding seriously, her expression focused. She glanced at a folder on her desk, then looked up and made eye contact with Malik through the glass. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she recognized him, but she was mid-conversation, so she simply gave him a small nod and returned to her call. Malik wondered if Mrs. Hargrove had already called ahead to complain about him. Assistant Principal Robert Klein handled the meeting. Principal Carver was still occupied with her phone call, her office door closed. Mr. Klein was a white man in his middle years who had been at Jefferson Elementary for quite some time. He wore khakis and a blue polo shirt with the school logo. He had the kind of face that always looked slightly disappointed. "Sit down, Malik." Malik sat in the chair across from Klein's desk. It was too big for him. His feet barely touched the floor. "So," Klein began, opening a folder, "Mrs. Hargrove tells me you disrupted class and refused to correct false information in your assignment." "Sir, it's not false. My dad really is Malik." Klein held up a hand. "I pulled your file. Your father is listed as Raymond Thompson. Occupation, government. That's what's in our system." "That's what he writes on forms, sir, for security reasons." "Security reasons," Klein chuckled, not meanly but like an adult humoring a child's imagination. "Malik, I understand wanting your father to seem important. A lot of kids do that, but making up elaborate stories about generals and classified information." "I'm not making it up." Malik's voice came out louder than he intended. Klein's face hardened. "Lower your voice. You're already in trouble, son. Don't make it worse." Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly. A text from his dad. "Running late. Briefing at Pentagon got moved up. We'll be there soon. Hang tight." Malik's heart leaped. He showed the phone to Klein. "See, he's coming. He'll be here soon." Klein barely glanced at the screen. "Malik, I can't verify anything from a text message. You could have anyone's number saved as Dad in your contacts. But here's what's going to happen." Klein leaned forward. "You're going to return to class. You're going to apologize to Mrs. Hargrove for being disrespectful. You're going to rewrite that assignment with truthful information. And then we're going to move forward. Understood?" Malik felt his hands beginning to shake. "You don't believe me. I believe you want attention, Malik. I understand that impulse. Kids from single-parent homes or families where parents work multiple jobs sometimes create stories to feel special. It's a cry for help, really. My parents are married. My mom's a surgeon at Walter Reed. My dad—" "That's enough." Klein stood. "Return to class right now, or I will call your parents in for a formal disciplinary conference. And trust me, you don't want that on your record." Malik stood slowly, his vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. "My father serves this country, sir. He's been deployed many times. He's earned the right to be believed." Klein's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Go back to class, Malik." When Malik returned to room 204, everything had changed. Parents now filled the back and sides of the classroom, sitting in a semicircle of borrowed chairs. Career Day was in full swing. Mrs. Hargrove stood at the front, introducing Mr. Prescott. "So grateful to have these distinguished guests with us today. Mr. Prescott works with some of the most powerful people in Washington. Let's give him our full attention." Applause rippled through the room. Malik slid into his seat as quietly as possible. Tyrell leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" Before Malik could answer, Mrs. Hargrove's voice cut across the room. "Malik, do you have something to share with the class?" Every head turned. Students, parents, everyone stared. "Ma'am, your apology." Malik felt his stomach drop. The room went completely silent. This was no longer just his classmates. There were adults here, professional people, watching him be humiliated. A young black boy being forced to apologize for telling the truth. I don't have anything to apologize for, ma'am." The room gasped. Several parents exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked at Malik as if he were being disrespectful. Mrs. Hargrove's jaw tightened. "Excuse me? In front of our honored guests, you're going to continue this defiance." Bradley's mother, Mrs. Prescott, a lawyer in a gray suit, spoke up gently. "Perhaps we should let the child explain." "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Prescott, but classroom management is my responsibility." Mrs. Hargrove's smile was tight and professional, yet her eyes were hard. She turned back to Malik. "You have two choices, young man. You can apologize right now and rewrite your assignment with honest information, or you can spend the rest of career day sitting in the office while your classmates enjoy our guests. Which will it be?" Malik's voice cracked when he spoke. "When my dad gets here." "Your father is not coming, Malik." The words echoed through the classroom like a slap. Parents shifted in their seats. Some students looked down at their desks. Mrs. Hargrove continued, her voice taking on a tone of forced patience. "Sweetheart, I understand this is hard, but the truth is your father probably works a regular government job. Maybe at the VA, maybe at a military base doing paperwork. Those are perfectly respectable positions." She walked closer to his desk. "But you've created this fantasy about generals in Korea and important decisions because you're embarrassed. I get it. You see Bradley's dad meeting with senators and you want your family to seem just as important." Her voice dropped. Quieter now, but somehow more cutting. "But Malik, there is no shame in being ordinary. The shame is in lying about it, especially when you come from a community that already struggles with stereotypes about honesty." "And Mrs. Hargrove," Mrs. Prescott stood up. "I really don't think—" "Please, Mrs. Prescott, sit down." The lawyer sat slowly, her expression troubled. Tyrell muttered under his breath, "This is so messed up." "What was that, Tyrell?" "Nothing, ma'am." "Tyrell Jackson, I heard you. Office now." "But I didn't." "Now." Tyrell grabbed his backpack and walked out, giving Malik one last look of solidarity before disappearing into the hallway. Malik was alone now, completely isolated in a room full of people. Mrs. Hargrove stood over him, arms crossed, waiting for his apology. The other parents looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The clock on the wall showed time slipping away. His father would arrive soon. But right now, in this moment, Malik Thompson had never felt smaller in his entire life. He looked down at his desk at the empty space where his assignment had been before she tore it up. His hands gripped the edge of the desk. And then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He stood up. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "my name is Malik Thompson. My father is General Raymond Thompson. He's a 4-star general in the United States Army. He served for many years, and when he gets here, you're going to owe me an apology." Mrs. Hargrove's face flushed deep red. "Sit down." "No, ma'am." The room held its breath. "Malik Thompson, if you do not sit down right now." The classroom door opened. Principal Linda Carver stepped inside, slightly out of breath, her face flushed. "Mrs. Hargrove, hallway, immediately." The tone of her voice made it clear this was not a request. Mrs. Hargrove blinked in surprise. "Principal Carver, I'm in the middle of Now, Eleanor." Every parent in the room noticed the use of her first name. That never happened. Mrs. Hargrove followed Principal Carver into the hallway, the door closing behind them with a soft click. Through the small window, students could see them talking. Principal Carver's face was serious. Mrs. Hargrove's expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. Malik sat back down, his heart pounding. Whatever was happening out there, it had to do with him. In the hallway, Principal Carver kept her voice low but firm. "Eleanor, we have a situation." Mrs. Hargrove crossed her arms defensively. "If this is about Malik Thompson, I was simply maintaining classroom standards. The boy was clearly— I just spent quite some time on the phone with Fort Myers Protocol Office." The words hung in the air. Mrs. Hargrove blinked. "Protocol Office?" Yes, they called because we have a very distinguished visitor arriving. Carver pulled out her phone, showing Hargrove an email. They needed to confirm our security clearances, parking arrangements, and whether we could accommodate a security detail. Mrs. Hargrove's face went pale. Security detail for career day? For Malik Thompson's father? The hallway seemed to tilt. Malik Thompson. Yes, Eleanor. The fourth-grade boy you publicly humiliated this morning for supposedly lying about his father being a four-star general. Oh my God, the boy you sent to my office, the boy whose assignment you tore up, the boy you accused of making up stories because of where he lives and how he looks. Mrs. Hargrove's hand went to her mouth. I thought he was exaggerating. He lives in that modest apartment complex. The father isn't on any social registers. There was no indication. Because senior military officials maintain low profiles for security reasons. Principal Carver had never raised her voice at a teacher in all her years of administration, but she was raising it now. I have spent the last while on the phone with a very polite but very firm aide explaining why a fourth grader was called a liar for telling the truth about his father's service. Do you have any idea what you've done? Through the hallway windows, both women could see movement outside. 3 black SUVs pulled into the school's front circle. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Secret Service or military security. Carver was not sure which. They moved with practiced precision, scanning the area. Then from the center vehicle, a man stepped out. He was tall, dignified, and wearing full military dress uniform. The dark blue jacket was immaculate. Medals covered his chest in neat rows, each one representing service, sacrifice, campaigns. On each shoulder, 4 silver stars caught the morning sunlight. General Raymond Thompson had arrived. Mrs. Hargrove felt her knees go weak. Oh God! Oh God! He's real. Yes, Eleanor. He's real, and right now he's walking into my school to pick up the pieces of what you did to his son. Inside the classroom, students and parents noticed the commotion outside. Is that the president? One kid whispered. Look at all those security guys. Mr. Prescott, the lobbyist, stood and moved to the window. His eyes widened. That's a 4-star general. The room erupted in whispers. Malik sat frozen at his desk. Through the window, he could see his father walking toward the school entrance with that calm, measured stride he had seen 1,000 times. His dad was here in uniform. Everyone was about to see the truth. General Raymond Thompson walked through Jefferson Elementary's main entrance like he was reviewing troops, calm, measured, taking in every detail. The security personnel remained outside per his instructions. This was not a military operation. This was a father checking on his son. Principal Carver met him in the main hallway. General Thompson, sir. I'm Principal Carver. I want to apologize. He shook her hand firmly but briefly. Principal Carver, I appreciate you accommodating the short notice. I apologize for the disruption to your school day. His voice was professional, controlled, yet there was steel underneath. I understand there was some miscommunication regarding my son's assignment. Behind Carver, Mrs. Hargrove stood frozen, her face the color of chalk. General Thompson's eyes moved to her. Not angry, just assessing. You're Malik's teacher? Yes, sir, Mrs. Hargrove. General, I want to apologize. There was terrible confusion about... Confusion. His tone did not rise. It did not need to. My son was called a liar in front of his peers for telling the truth about his father's service. Where exactly was the confusion? Ma'am, I didn't know. I had no way to verify. You didn't verify. He let the words hang there. You assumed. Mrs. Hargrove had no response. General Thompson continued, his voice quiet but cutting. Ma'am, I've spent decades leading soldiers. One thing I've learned in that time, assumptions about people based on how they look, where they live, or what you think they should be. Those assumptions are usually wrong, and they're always dangerous. He adjusted his uniform jacket slightly. I've commanded troops in combat zones. I've briefed presidents and foreign ministers. I've made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But right now, the most important thing I need to do is check on my young son, who was humiliated for telling his truth. His eyes never left hers. Where is Malik? The classroom door opened. Principal Carver entered first, her professional smile not quite hiding her stress. Class, we have a very special guest joining us for Career Day. Mrs. Hargrove followed, looking like she might be sick. Then General Raymond Thompson stepped through the doorway. The effect was immediate. The room went silent. Not classroom silent, cemetery silent. Every parent stood without thinking. Mr. Prescott, who regularly dined with senators, actually straightened his posture like a cadet. Dr. Carter, the surgeon, placed her hand over her heart. The military families in the room recognized the rank immediately. 4 stars. You do not see 4 stars walk into an elementary school every day. Malik saw his father, and everything he had been holding inside broke open. Dad. His voice was small, broken, relieved. General Thompson's professional demeanor cracked for just a moment. His eyes found his son sitting at that desk. Tear-stained and exhausted, he crossed the room in 4 long strides, not caring about protocol or appearances. He knelt down to Malik's level, right there in front of everyone, and pulled his son into his arms. I'm here, Malik. I'm here. I'm sorry I was late. Malik buried his face in his father's uniform and cried. Not because he was sad anymore, because he had been holding everything in for so long, because his dad was finally here, because the truth was finally visible. The embrace lasted only moments, but in those moments, every person in that room understood what they had witnessed this morning. A child telling the truth and being destroyed for it. General Thompson stood, keeping Malik's hand in his. He turned to face the class. Good morning. I'm General Raymond Thompson, United States Army. I apologize for the disruption to your career day, but I promised my son I'd be here, and I don't break promises to my son. His voice was calm, professional, yet every word carried weight. He glanced at Mrs. Hargrove, who stood near her desk, looking like she wanted to disappear. Ma'am, I understand there was some question about Malik's assignment. The room held its breath. Mrs. Hargrove opened her mouth, but no words came out. Principal Carver stepped in. General Thompson, please. If you'd like to share with the students about your career, we'd be honored. He nodded once. Thank you. He turned back to the class, Malik still holding his hand. My son wrote that I'm a 4-star general who served for many years. Every single word of that is true. I've commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've served in Korea, Germany, and across the United States. Right now, I help develop military strategy for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The students stared with wide eyes. Malik also wrote that leadership means serving others, not yourself. He learned that by watching his mother, Dr. Renee Thompson, a pediatric surgeon who saves children's lives while I was halfway around the world. He learned it by moving many times, by changing schools often, by spending birthdays and holidays without his father because I was deployed. He paused, looking at each student. My son didn't exaggerate in his assignment. If anything, he was modest. The truth of what military families sacrifice is harder than anything he wrote on that paper. His eyes moved to Mrs. Hargrove. When a child tells you their truth, especially when that truth is difficult or doesn't match your expectations, the first instinct should be to listen, not to assume they're lying because their truth makes you uncomfortable. The room was absolutely silent. Mrs. Hargrove's voice came out as a whisper. General Thompson, I owe Malik an apology, a real one. She turned to face Malik, tears streaming down her face. Malik, I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. I made assumptions about you and your family based on things that had nothing to do with who you are. I judged you. I didn't listen to you. I didn't believe you. And I hurt you. Her voice broke. You deserved so much better from me. You deserve to be believed. I am so sorry. Malik looked at his father, who gave him a small nod. Your choice, son. Malik took a breath. Mrs. Hargrove, my dad says everybody makes mistakes. He says the important thing is what you do after you make them. The wisdom in those words, coming from a young boy who had been humiliated only hours earlier, hit everyone in the room. Maybe you could, believe kids more, even when their stories sound too big to be true. I will, Malik. Mrs. Hargrove wiped her eyes. I promise. I will. Tyrell was brought back from the office. General Thompson shook his hand and thanked him for standing up for Malik. Bradley Prescott approached Malik afterward. I'm sorry I didn't say more earlier. That was really brave what you did. Other students gathered around Malik. Not with pity now, with respect. Mr. Prescott, the lobbyist, approached General Thompson. Sir, I work with members of Congress every day. What you said about listening first, I needed to hear that too. Mrs. Morales, who cleaned the Capitol building, shook the general's hand with tears in her eyes. Thank you for what you said about service. Every kind. Principal Carver made an announcement to the class. Effective immediately. Jefferson Elementary will be implementing comprehensive implicit bias training for all staff members. What happened this morning should never happen again. Mrs. Hargrove nodded, her hand over her heart. I'll be the first to sign up. The general then did something unexpected. From his pocket he pulled out a small gold coin, a command coin from his unit. These were traditionally given for exceptional service. He placed it in Mrs. Hargrove's hand. I'm not giving you this for what happened this morning, ma'am. I'm giving it to you for your apology. That took real courage. Use it to remember that growth comes from our mistakes, not our successes. Mrs. Hargrove clutched the coin, nodding, unable to speak. For the next while, General Thompson gave a presentation about military service, leadership, and sacrifice. He answered questions from curious students. He shared age-appropriate stories. He made every child feel important. And, at the end, Principal Carver suggested a class photo. Students gathered around the general. Malik stood front and center, his hand in his father's hand, wearing the biggest smile of his life. That photo would spread widely on social media within days. But right now, in this moment, it was just a son standing with his dad. Finally believed, finally vindicated, finally seen. That evening, the Thompson family sat together in their modest Arlington apartment. The same apartment Mrs. Hargrove had judged as proof that Malik was lying. Dr. Renee Thompson had left surgery early when Raymond called to tell her what happened. Now she sat on the couch with Malik tucked under her arm, still in her scrubs. General Thompson sat across from them, out of uniform now, back in jeans and a t-shirt. Just a dad again. How are you feeling, baby? Renee asked, smoothing Malik's hair. Tired? Malik leaned into his mother. But good, I think. What did you learn today? His father asked. Malik thought about it carefully. His parents had always taught him to find lessons in hard experiences. I learned that telling the truth is really hard sometimes, especially when people don't want to believe you. But you should still do it anyway. Raymond nodded. What else? That people's ideas about you can be totally wrong. But that doesn't mean you should change who you are to fit what they expect. Renee kissed the top of his head. That's very wise, Malik. But, Dad... Malik looked up at his father. Yeah, son? Why didn't you just tell the school about your job before? Then this wouldn't have happened. It was a fair question, one that Raymond had been asking himself all afternoon. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Malik, your worth has nothing to do with my rank. You're valuable because of who you are. You're kind. You're honest. You're brave. I never want you to think you need my accomplishments to matter. He paused. But I also realize now that keeping such a low profile puts you in an impossible position. You shouldn't have had to defend your truth alone. So what happens now? Now we make sure this never happens to another kid at Jefferson Elementary or anywhere else. In the time that followed, Jefferson Elementary looked different. Not physically, but the culture had shifted. Every staff member completed comprehensive implicit bias training. It was not optional. Principal Carver made it a requirement for continued employment. The training covered racial bias, class bias, and the danger of assumptions, real scenarios, uncomfortable conversations, necessary growth. Mrs. Eleanor Hargrove attended every session. She did not just participate. She helped lead them. In a faculty meeting not long after the incident, she stood in front of her colleagues and shared her experience. Not long ago, I hurt a child because I couldn't see past my own assumptions. I looked at Malik Thompson and decided his truth was impossible because it didn't match the picture I had in my head of what a general's family should look like. Her voice was steady now, stronger. I've spent the time since examining my biases, the ones I didn't even know I had. I've learned that my instincts about students were often just prejudice dressed up as experience. She held up the command coin General Thompson had given her. I keep this on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that growth comes from our mistakes, not our successes. The training led to real policy changes. New protocol: verify before questioning. If a student makes a claim about their family that seems unusual, the first step is to check with parents, not to interrogate the child. The Student Council, inspired by Malik's experience, created the Truth and Trust Initiative, a peer support system where students could talk about times they felt unheard or disbelieved. Malik became one of the founding members. Mrs. Hargrove's classroom changed too. On the first day back after the incident, she gathered her students and created a new classroom charter. The kids helped write it. It hung on the wall now in large letters. In this classroom, we believe first and question respectfully. We never assume someone is lying because their truth seems impossible. Everyone's story matters. Every student signed it, even Malik, especially Malik. Mrs. Hargrove also started a monthly family stories circle. Students could share about their families without judgment. The goal was not to compare or compete, just to listen and learn. During one session, Isabella Morales talked about how her mother took pride in her cleaning work at the Capitol building, how she knew every hallway and office, how senators sometimes asked her advice about the building's history. Mrs. Hargrove listened differently now. She heard the pride in Isabella's voice, instead of dismissing it as less important than other careers. Terrell talked about how his dad could diagnose car problems just by listening to the engine, how he'd built his small mechanic shop from nothing. Bradley Prescott surprised everyone by saying his dad's lobbying job seemed less important after meeting General Thompson, that he'd started thinking about what service really meant. And Malik. He talked about military families, about sacrifice, about the kids who move constantly and miss their parents and keep going anyway. The class listened without interruption. That's what changed most, the listening. The photo spread faster than anyone expected. The image of General Thompson in full dress uniform, 4 stars visible, kneeling beside his young son, while emotional students and parents looked on. The caption that went with it told the story, how a teacher had called a black student a liar for writing about his father's service, how she'd torn up his assignment, how she'd humiliated him publicly, and how a 4-star general had walked into that classroom to stand beside his son. News outlets picked it up. The story appeared on local news, then national broadcasts. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people focused on the racism, others on the classism, many on the courage it took for Malik to stand his ground. But the most shared aspect was Mrs. Hargrove's apology and transformation. People were tired of stories where the antagonist faced consequences but never changed. This was different. This showed redemption was possible. Not long after, Mrs. Hargrove received invitations to speak at education conferences about implicit bias. She accepted some, declined others, but always emphasized the same message. I'm not a hero of this story. I'm the cautionary tale. But I'm proof that people can change if they're willing to do the hard work. Malik today is different from the scared fourth grader who stood at the front of that classroom. He's more confident, still humble, still kind, but no longer afraid to share his truth. He started a peer mentoring program at Jefferson Elementary, where older students help younger ones navigate difficult situations. The first rule of the program: believe first, question with kindness. His friendship with Tyrell grew stronger. Bradley Prescott became a regular at their lunch table. Even Isabella Morales joined their group. They called themselves the Truth Squad, kids who committed to listening to each other's stories without judgment. General Thompson attended school events when his schedule allowed, not in uniform, just as Malik's dad. He wanted his son to know he was proud of him for who he was, not what his father did. Dr. Renee Thompson continued saving lives at Walter Reed, but she made sure to attend every one of Malik's presentations about military families, because that's what this was really about. Not generals or ranks or positions, but a family that loved each other, and a son who learned the truth, even when it's hard, is always worth defending. The Thompson family went back to their quiet life, but Jefferson Elementary and everyone who heard Malik's story was forever changed. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand in your truth, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong, especially then. Malik Thompson's story is one child's experience in one classroom in Arlington, Virginia. But it represents something much larger happening in schools across America every single day. Right now, somewhere a child is being told their truth doesn't matter because it doesn't match someone's expectations. A black student is being questioned more harshly than their white classmates. A child from a working-class family is being dismissed because adults assume they're exaggerating. A military kid is being misunderstood because people don't see the sacrifice behind their calm exterior. And most of the time, there is no four-star general walking through the door to make it right. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? The statistics are sobering. According to the U.S. Department of Education, black students are suspended or expelled at 3 times the rate of white students for the same infractions. Subjective offenses, things like defiance or disruption, account for most of these disparities. Translation: when a teacher has to use judgment about whether a student is being disrespectful, black students are often punished more severely. The same study found that 72% of teachers have never received any training in recognizing their own implicit biases. They're making decisions about children's futures based on assumptions they don't even know they have. Another study from the American Psychological Association found that black boys in elementary school are often seen as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers. They're given less benefit of the doubt, less grace, less childhood. Malik Thompson experienced all of this in one morning, and his story shows us the real cost. Children who feel unheard in school are far more likely to disengage academically. They stop raising their hands, stop sharing their stories, stop believing their truth matters. That's the invisible damage of bias, not just the moment of humiliation, but the slow erosion of a child's belief in themselves. But Malik's story also shows us something else. That change is possible, that people can grow, that systems can improve when we demand better. Mrs. Hargrove could have denied what she did. She could have made excuses. She could have blamed Malik for being too sensitive. Instead, she did the harder thing. She looked at her own biases. She apologized sincerely. She changed her classroom and her approach to teaching. That doesn't erase what she did, but it shows a path forward. Jefferson Elementary could have swept the incident under the rug. Instead, they implemented mandatory bias training. They changed their policies. They created systems to prevent it from happening again. That's how institutions improve, by acknowledging harm and taking concrete action to prevent future harm. And Malik, he could have let that experience make him small and quiet. Instead, he started a peer mentoring program. He shared his story. He helped other kids find their voice. That's resilience, not because trauma made him stronger, but because he chose to use his experience to help others. So, what can you do? First, Ask yourself some hard questions. When someone tells you their truth, especially someone from a marginalized community, do you believe them or do you immediately look for reasons to doubt? When a child shares something that seems unusual or impressive, is your first instinct to celebrate them or to question whether they're exaggerating? When you see someone being treated unfairly, do you speak up or do you stay silent to avoid making things awkward? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. Second, take action. If you're a parent, talk to your child's school about implicit bias training. Ask what policies they have to protect students from discrimination. If you're a teacher, examine your own classroom. Are you giving every student the same benefit of the doubt, or are your assumptions affecting how you treat them? If you're just someone who heard this story and felt something, share it. Conversations change culture. The more we talk about these issues, the harder they are to ignore. And finally, teach the children in your life that their truth matters, that they don't have to shrink themselves to make adults comfortable. That standing in your truth, even when it's hard, is always worth it. General Raymond Thompson didn't walk into Jefferson Elementary that morning to humiliate a teacher. He walked in to stand beside his son, to show Malik and every child watching that truth matters, that you matter. The question now is, what will you do with that message? Will you scroll past this story and forget it by tomorrow? Or will you let it change how you listen, how you believe, how you treat the people around you? Because here's the truth that Malik Thompson learned at a young age. One person standing in their truth can change an entire system, but only if the rest of us are willing to listen. If this story moved you, do 3 things. 1. Share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this message today. 2. Comment below. Have you ever been disbelieved when telling your truth or witnessed someone else's truth being dismissed? Your story matters. 3. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this about justice, redemption, and standing up for what's right are what this channel is all about. Remember, your truth matters. You matter. Don't let anyone make you forget.